Hello, and welcome to the MuseScore Café for today, April 10th, 2019. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this is a weekly series of video chats that I do with their live streaming. So if you're watching live, you can participate in the chat. My name is Marc Sabatella. I'm the Director of Education for MuseScore, and I just talk about different topics every week, take questions if there are questions. And the topic that I wanted to talk about today is rhythm. So that's going to be the main thing that I talk about. I'm also other things that come up during the course of things I will mention. Like right now, I just realized that I had customized a workspace down here, and I'm going to switch back to the standard advanced workspace. So this is already just like a random thing that people should know about if you don't already. When you first start MuseScore, the default is the basic workspace, and it has relatively fewer palettes. It's got relatively fewer buttons here. The advanced palette has, as you can see, more palettes, more buttons. And I had created a custom one because I was about to demonstrate something about customizing this, yeah, why not? I'll talk about that in a second. One of the things that I would talk about, since this just came up here, is you can actually customize what's on these toolbars. So for instance, I can go to create a custom workspace. What you do is you start with whichever one you want to start with. I actually want to create a more basic one. So I'm going to start with basic and then hit this plus button, and I'm going to create a more basic one that's going to be even more basic. And let's see, in order to do this right, I think I have to, first I apologize for the noise. I'm at what's supposed to be a study room at a library, and it turns out there's some sort of song and dance class happening next door that's interesting. I believe I should check the toolbars here because I'm going to be customizing my toolbars and I want this to be part of the workspace. So I think that's how I do this. Some of these features I don't use often enough to remember how to do. Yeah, that's what the noise is, and I really apologize about that. What am I doing? Oh yes, what I want to do is I want to make this even more basic. So what I'm going to do is go to View, Toolbars, and Customize Toolbars. And here what I can do is remove things. So these are the actions that I can add. These are the actions that are currently on the toolbar right now. And then I can remove, I can add additional ones. This one has the 64th note and the 128th note removed already. I'm going to remove temporarily this guy. So I guess that means I move it from current to there. So there we go. So now my toolbar is only going to have quarter notes, half notes, and whole notes, I believe. There we go. Because that's going to be my starting point for what I want to talk about. So again, I'm going to apologize for the noise that we're hearing. I wonder if it's actually, let me just try something. I'm going to face the other direction, and that way the microphone won't be facing that. Maybe this helps a little bit, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. Okay, so so my thing is about rhythm, and I teased with a little statement that there's an exciting new feature just developed, and some of you may already know what that is. You may have seen some of the discussions on the forum, but it's a exciting feature that people have been requesting for years that I implemented last week, and it was just merged in this morning. So it's going to be, well, it is part of the current nightly builds, will be part of the next update. And so I want to talk about that in a second. But first, I want to pose a little question, and that is, I now have simplified this toolbar. Oh, well, same. I'm really sorry about that noise. I just don't know. Yeah, I don't know what to do about it. So, the question is, let's pretend these are the only note values that have been invented. Let's pretend we haven't invented 8th notes yet. We haven't invented 16th notes yet. All we have are whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes. In fact, we have dots, but we can only put dots on the half note, because if we put a dot on a quarter note, we'd need an 8th note to go with it. So basically, we haven't divided the beat yet. How many ways are there to fill a measure with just those note values. Now this is a topic I talked about a bit in a previous Café a few months ago, but I want to revisit it now. The other thing I'm going to do right now is that people might want to be aware of is close the inspector, because the inspector is really useful if you're making manual adjustments to things, all sorts of interesting settings there, but we're not going to be doing any of that stuff. So I'm just going to close that. All right. Let's see. I'm not so sure the noise isn't actually coming from other direction, but oh well. How many ways are there to fill a measure with just whole notes, half notes, and quarter notes? Well, to get started, I know, obviously, a whole note. Whoops, I meant to put a whole note. I'm going to make it a C. Okay, so whole notes are definitely there. What else? Well, there's 2 half notes, right? That's the thing. Then we can maybe combine half notes and quarter notes, right? We could have a half note and 2 quarters, or the reverse, 2 quarters and a half, right? What else do we have? Well, we haven't used a dotted half yet, so let's try a dotted half. Dotted half, and then, well, what's left is a quarter. And then the other way around, right? We could have a quarter followed by a dotted half. We haven't had 4 quarters yet, so quarter, 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 whoops, don't see. Quarter, 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 quarter. There is, so if I'm teaching a theory class, I will challenge people to like try to think of how many there's going to be, and offer rewards for people who get the answer right. I will just tell you right now, there's only one more, and it's the one that we see a lot in jazz, because it's the one that involves syncopation, and it goes like this: quarter, half, quarter. You got it. You got it. That's the one. So this is it. These are the only rhythms that we could make with just quarters, halves, and whole notes plus a dot. That's it. There's no other way to fill a measure there. You can try all you want. You're never going to come up with another one. So the only other way you can fill a measure is to put in eighth notes. Assuming we're talking about 4/4, because we are talking about 4/4. Things get more complicated in 3, but 3 in some sense is 2 plus 1, and we're going to look at things that way if we ever talk about 3 today. So I have these rhythms. Now, as soon as we talk about eighth notes, things get, there's more options. But the really important point, and the point that I made in talking about, let me switch now to the regular basic palette, because now I need eighth notes. There we go. Now I've got eighth notes and sixteenths and things. In order to start talking about eighth notes now, it's going to get more complicated. But the point I made in this previous Café where I talked about rhythm is the concept is going to remain the same. In other words, as soon as we introduce eighth notes into the picture, the way we generally deal with this in notating rhythm is we cut the measure in half and think of each half of a measure, each half of the measure. So just 2 beats at a time. And within those 2 beats, now suddenly whole notes no longer a thing, right? Now it's half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes. And we will be able to fill each half a measure with half notes, quarter notes, and eighth notes the exact same 8 ways. So here is where this kind of exciting new feature comes in. I am going to select this passage here, copy it. Now I'm going to click here. Now you all may know, if you've really delved into MuseScore, maybe you've seen me use these commands, that we have a command Q that will half the length of the selected note. Q again, and then we have W that will, oops, that was Shift W. Shift W actually adds a dot and then doubles it. W just doubles. So Q halves the length, W doubles it. There is now a new command. Let me reselect this region just in case I lost my selection. I don't think I did. Copy, right? I am now going to do a new command, which is Control-Shift-Q. You ready for this? There we go. What did this do? It just took that entire passage that I had and pasted a version of it with all the note durations cut in half. And it did that just in one command. So this is a feature that people have been begging for years, for a number of reasons. One is, well, maybe you just started to enter your song using eighth notes and then later decided, you know what, this would have been better in 16ths, or vice versa. So there you have it. Now this feature is there. And then similarly, we have a Control-Shift-W that will double everything. So now the whole note becomes tied whole notes, the half notes become whole notes, etc. So there's more to the feature than that, and I'll show that in a minute. But let me go back to actually talking about rhythm. So you can see here, this was a whole note. If I think about these now in half measures, that's my half measure, right? That's just the C half note. These two half notes, that kind of became these two quarter notes. Half, quarter, quarter became quarter, eighth, eighth. Quarter, quarter, half became eighth, eighth, quarter. Boom, dotted half, quarter became dotted quarter, eighth. Quarter, dotted half became eighth, dotted quarter. 4 quarters became 4 eighths, and our syncopated rhythm, quarter, half, quarter, became eighth, quarter, eighth. Hopefully I said that right. Quarter, half, quarter, yeah, eighth, quarter, eighth. So that one command did the work of cutting everything in half for me, and let me paste it in there, which is great just for the commands purpose, and I'll talk about more about that and you know why people are excited about that. But I'm also, as I said, I just really want to talk about rhythm a little more. So I'm going to use these dotted bar lines here, and I'm just going to add dotted bar lines to talk about this, because really, if I add these dotted bar lines in the middle of a measure, this really illustrates that much more clearly what I'm talking about, that each measure here, this measure here is that half measure, right? This measure here is that half measure. Well, I can't really select because I didn't really divide the measure up. You know what? I should have done that. Let me undo this and show you another feature. So I just dragged those in. If I control drag, it's actually going to split the measure there. And when I did that, it added as a normal bar line. I think that's a bug that I may have just fixed. Maybe I didn't. I don't know. That fix isn't merged in yet, so I can't say. Control drag to split the measure there. Control drag. Control drag. I could have just changed the time signature to 2/4 also, but I kind of wanted to show this feature, so there you go. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I really wanted all those things to be dotted, or that dashed, so I will make them be dashed. In fact, I'll just make them all be dashed. I don't know why I didn't just change it to 2/4, because I'm stubborn that way. So now you can see that these are like half measures, because this really does happen in 4/4. It's not only a 2/4 thing. In 4/4, we actually do divide things up this way. In other words, even if this was a full real measure, we don't beam these 4 eighth notes together. If this had been a full measure, we don't beam these 2 eighth notes together. We really do honor like an imaginary dotted line across the middle of a bar line. So if I wanted this rhythm here, eighth, quarter, eighth, and I wanted it here in this measure, eighth, quarter, eighth, well, I can't do it because it's sitting across the middle. I can do eighth, quarter, eighth on either side of the measure, but I can't do eighth, quarter, eighth in the middle of the measure. Instead, I use a tie. I will tie, those 2 notes together. So, boy, those C's are just staying selected. Probably something to do with the splitting of the measure that caused those things to stay selected. I'm not sure why that's the case. Interesting. Another bug. Minor one. This is how you would notate this same rhythm, eighth, quarter, eighth. When it's across the middle of a bar line, you have to split that quarter quarter note up into 2/8 like this. So that's a way that you need to know when you're notating music. If you're notating it in eighth notes like this, then you have to split the measure in half and make sure that each half measure is only one of those 8 things. So in each half of a measure, you put in that. So you are not allowed to have a note. If you're going to have eighth notes in your measure, you're not allowed to have a note that kind of starts here and then straddles that middle line. I say you're not allowed to. There's a couple exceptions, like since we've already accepted that a half note is allowed to straddle the middle, then we could put a half note here. A half note is allowed to start on beat 2. So I'm still allowed to put a half note on beat 2, even if I have eighth notes over there. So anyhow, there are complexities to these rules, but this is the basic idea. So I've been talking about this as a way of knowing how to write rhythms, but what I also want to emphasize is that it's also valid as a way of learning to read rhythms. The next thing I want to do is do this same command again to half those, and you can see that now the same is true with sixteenths. Here, each beat, I'm going to get rid of that tie, I don't need it anymore. Each beat now is one of those 8 things. So what was a whole note here is now just a quarter note. What was 2 half notes is 2 eighth notes. Or if I look at this version, what was quarter and 2/8 is now eighth and 2/16, etc. It's the same exact 8 rhythms. The bug of looking like notes are still selected has been around a little bit. I mean, they're not really selected. If I press delete, they don't go away, right? So they just never got unglued. I wonder if I select the whole thing, transpose it, they're still there. That is really weird. So I've now got my 8 rhythms now written in sixteenths. So if you are a jazz musician like I am, we spend our lives reading rhythms involving eighth notes because that's the language of jazz, including this syncopated rhythm here, and this has got some syncopation too. So we're used to seeing all sorts of crazy syncopations with eighth notes. We're not as used to seeing it with 16th notes unless you do it a really lot. If you're playing in a funk band, you're going to see these 16th syncopations a lot more. And there are some crazy, crazy rhythms that can be written with syncopated 16th. So my point is going to be, though, that all rhythms that you might write, let me add another double bar there to indicate that that's the end of that section. This is the end of that section. I could go and put in my dotted lines between the beats, but the beams are kind of doing that for me. So can the expector change? Well, I guess I could, but it's not really blue. It's not really blue. It's just selected. Oops, that's F10. F8 is the inspector. So it's already saying that it's black. You know, really, if I really want to get rid of it and it is bugging me, I'm just going to delete the dang note and then add another one. Thank you. Delete, add another one. Delete, add another one. All right, the blue's gone. Yay. All right, so so now I've got my 8 rhythms written as 16th notes, and there are all sorts of crazy syncopations that can be written and that you will see a lot reading, especially funk music, where it's written with a slow tempo, but 16th. Bum, ba-doo-da, doo-da, doo-da, I just made that rhythm up, but that's the sort of type of rhythm that we're going to see a lot. So the proper way of writing these rhythms is going to be, every beat has got to be one of those 4 things. So maybe it starts that way, bum, ba-doo-da, that's what I think I remember singing. And so that's bum, ba-doo-da, So that there was a rest in there, or a tied note, if I'm clapping out a rhythm. Clashing the note and pressing escape. I thought I did that and it didn't work, but I mean, certainly it normally does, but maybe it would have in that case, but I'm not sure. I tried a couple things and none of them seemed to work, so I don't know. But yeah, maybe that would have. Maybe I didn't try that. So bum, ba doo da. This rhythm here might feel hard to read because of the syncopations. Yet if I'd written it this way, ba, 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 boo, ba, bum, that rhythm is just this, ba, ba, and then this, ba, ba, ba. No one would have struggled with that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. In fact, I could probably go to that class next year that's full of the 6-year-olds singing and dancing, give them that rhythm, and a fair number of them would have gotten that rhythm right, because it's only quarter notes and half notes and a dot. So, you know, if you got a good music teacher, like my wife, who teaches rhythm well, then you would probably be able to get a rhythm like that. So if I just copy this down to here, oops, I meant to paste it, sorry. Copy, paste, copy, paste. Bum, boo, bum, bum, bum. That's a fairly simple rhythm then. I mean, it's got some syncopation to it, but it's not rocket science. You look at it this way and it looks more complicated. The key to becoming a good reader of rhythms is to recognize that this is just that there's not an infinite variety of rhythms in the world. There's just those 8. Okay, there's complications, there's triplets. I'm glossing over some details, but boy, there's a whole lot of truth in what I'm saying, so let's stick to that. This rhythm, bum, ba-do, da, is the same rhythm as this, bum, boo, bum, ba, if you just slow the tempo down. Bum, boo, bum, 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 versus bum, ba, boo, bum, Same exact rhythm, just different tempo. So what happens is you get good at reading these 8 rhythms in 16th notes if you do that a lot. And then you see the same ones all the time. One of the things that's going to complicate things is, yeah, there's rests and there's ties. But the ties, like I think what I actually saying was boom, ba-do, da, Well, where's that next beat? Bum, ba-do, da, It was on an off beat. I think what it was is it's this rhythm right here, but with the first note missing. In other words, it was this, but with that as a rest. Bum, ba-do, da, That's what that rhythm is. So it's the same basic rhythm as this, but it's written with a rest. Some people would choose to beam over that rest to make it that much clearer. So if I go to beam properties, I can select the rest and say, I think if I say this, that's going to do what I want. There you go. Except, what the, oh yeah, I guess that's correct, technically speaking. This is a 16th, that's that. That's bugging me to not see the 16th on that bar there, so I'm not sure I'm happy with that. I wonder what happens if I do that. Yeah, okay, that does that. That's not what I want. And now I've just messed this up. So let's reset some things here. All right, so I have now just messed up this measure. Oh, no, I didn't. I don't know why. I'm just confusing myself. That was fine as it was. I'm confusing myself. I thought the 16th was wrong for some reason. I'm confusing myself. So I'm going to go back and make that be this, because I didn't really like how it looked with that thing barred, with it beamed. So if you read a lot of 16th notes, you get good at reading this type of rhythm. Bum, ba-do, da, And if I had written it out this way, again, bum, boo, bum, 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 bum. That's the same rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Bum, boo, bum, 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 bum. I'm probably putting this guy a little late in how I'm singing. I'm subdividing. 1, boo, boo, ba, ba, ba. There you go. So, you get really intimately familiar with these 8 rhythms and how to write them in the variations that include rests. Or maybe when I clap it out, this felt like a short note, but maybe it's really meant to be a long note, right? Maybe it's really meant to be bum, ba, doo, dun, 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 where this note isn't a rest, it's actually just tied over. Well, then you write it this way. Again, you don't try to combine those into a single eighth note. We want to be able to read each beat, and that's what makes reading 16th note rhythms possible. I won't say easy, but it makes it possible, is because you're going to see everything beamed together, which is kind of why I wanted to try to beam that one together, even though the rest was in there. I just didn't really like how it looked. But now, even if I get off somewhere, I can get right back on the next beat. Maybe I messed this rhythm up, but I can be back on the beat here, and then each beat takes care of itself. So that's kind of some stuff about reading and writing rhythms. I want to turn back to the actual thing that I implemented and just talk a little more about the feature itself and show it, oops, I didn't mean to go there, show it in action in a more complicated example. So for instance, some of you may know that there has been a plugin that's been available, or several different plugins that have been available, going back to MuseScore 1 actually, that would attempt to do this halving or doubling of durations. The plugins that existed, there was one that worked for 1, there was one that worked in MuseScore 2, but it only handled certain cases. There was another one that handled other cases, but it crashed, and all sorts of things that were like partial solutions that didn't really do the job fully. And I guess partially because of that, and partially because we always just sort of assumed it was a hard problem to solve, especially if you wanted to deal with things like triplets. We sort of never really got around to implementing it. But one day I just sort of had this idea, which frankly I had a few years ago, to be honest. I had this idea a few years ago, posted about it on the forums, and didn't really get much response, so I sort of let it go. But then just a couple weeks ago, or maybe even just last week, it really came back to me that copy and paste already does most of what we would need this facility to do, of being able to half and double the durations. It's more like all I do is we copy this and it goes to the clipboard, and now it's just a stream of notes. There's no bar lines in the clipboard. There's no information about, well, there are, if there's clef changes, that shows up in the clipboard, but there's other things, a lot of things do not show up in copy and paste. Time signature changes and things like that don't. It's really just a stream of notes. And so when you paste, we're basically spitting out that stream of notes one at a time. And it just occurred to me, well, all I have to do is double each note, or half each note, before I spit it out again. And I swear to God, it was 12 lines of code to make this happen. All I have to do is find the places where I find the duration of the note and get ready to write it, and I either divide it by 2 or multiply it by 2 as appropriate. And so I had to do it for notes, and then I had to do it for the tuplet itself, as well as the values within it. So that was 2 different places in the code where I had to do it. And then you also have to make sure that when you spit the notes out, you don't just spit out an 8th note and then start this guy on beat 2. We have to actually start this guy a beat earlier. So there was a 3rd place, the place where I kind of keep track of where I'm spitting. 3 places in the code where I added like 2 lines of code to double or half the length. And that's it, I swear. It was like 12 lines of code, and suddenly this was there. It works for multiple voices. It works for triplets. I haven't gotten it to break yet. It works if you've got a clef change in the middle of here. It works if you've got text or chord symbols in it or whatever. It just works. So it's really a nice facility. It's there in the nightly builds already, as of like an hour ago. So and it will be part of the 3.1 release that we're going to be putting out very soon. Like, I think there'll be a beta version of 3.1 coming this week. So so again, to actually do this, you copy normally. So you select something, Control-C to copy, and then you either use Control-Shift-Q to paste it with everything halved, or Control-Shift-W to paste it with everything doubled. And it does the right things in terms of splitting things up. This quarter note needed to be split up now into a half note across the bar line that's tied. This half note here needed to turn into this there. So far, I mean, I think it handles everything. The code that actually does the pasting wasn't that complicated to begin with, and so there was only a few places I had to find to do this, and so far we haven't managed to break it. So I encourage people to try it out. But there's another thing I want to show you about this. The way this works is I'm showing you how to do it with half and double, but there's other things you might want to do. Now, some of these you'll be able to do, some of those you won't be able to do yet. But really, we should be able to scale to other things other than just halving and doubling. Like, what if I just wanted to go straight to 16th notes? Yes, you could do what I did before and first cut it in half once and then cut it in half again. But what if you just wanted to do that in one step? Well, I could. Okay, if a triplet goes over a bar line, just like with paste, we're not going to handle it. So if I try to take this guy and I can paste that and it's fine. But if I now select this and try to paste it, I'm going to get the probably familiar to some of you. Oh, that one's still good. But if I try to double this, I think I'm going to get the triplet cannot, or doublet cannot cross bar lines. So yeah, we don't have special code to allow you to figure out how to split up tuplets across bar lines. So that's going to remain a limitation, just like it is for copy and paste. It's the only thing that we don't handle, and we don't handle it because copy and paste doesn't handle it. We don't have any way of handling triplets across bar lines, period. It just isn't something that we do. So if we ever do support it, then copy and paste will support it, and then this feature will support it because it's all just right there in the same code. Yeah, so I just did that doubling and tripling, or doubling and quadrupling in a few different steps. I actually, because it's the same code, it's just a scaling factor, I actually have another command that I need to customize the shortcut for, because I don't have a command. By the way, those shortcuts are, you don't need to memorize the shortcut. It's right here in the edit menu. Paste half duration, paste double duration. But there's another command that I didn't put in the menu because it's a little strange of a command, but it's kind of fun. If I go to Edit Preferences Shortcut and look for Paste, you'll see there's a command Paste Special, and I've already customized that shortcut, Control-Alt-V, because by default there's not one. If I select this, copy, and what if I want to divide this up into, like, not just half, but into 4 pieces, or make it 4 times faster? I've made that paste special command work off the toolbar. Eventually there'll be a dialog for it, I think, if we keep the command at all. So my default is going to be, if I use paste special with quarter note selected, it's going to just keep everything the same. So if I do Control-Alt-V, I'm just going to get the same thing. But if I click the 8th note, I'm going to get that everything halved. So Control-Alt-V, I get that. If I select the 16th note duration and then click here, Control-Alt-V, now I get that version where everything's been cut that much. Or I could select the whole note duration and get everything doubled twice. But wait, there's more. There's dots, and dots work too. So if I select the dotted 8th as the duration and paste, Control-Alt-V, I can get this bit of craziness. I'm not claiming there's any musically valid reason to do that in particular. It looks like we may have done something wrong, but I don't know that for a fact. It's feeling to me like there's pretty much no way that position of that triplet could be good. So I don't know exactly what's happening here. It's boom, boom, boom. These guys are tripleted together. That's interesting, but they're not showing as beamed together. But this is my triplet, right? That's the first note of the triplet. Yeah, triplet, triplet, triplet. So it's just the beaming that's a little funny. That's quite interesting the way that worked out. it's possible that that's sort of technically correct, that this is the start of beat 2. I can't even, like now it's getting too complicated of a rhythm for me to count. Is this really on literally beat 2? It says so down here. So I guess that's why it chose to beam it the way it did. This note is literally on beat 2. It started off as, you know, the middle of a triplet, but by multiplying it by, you know, by dividing it the way I divided it, that's what I got. So anyhow, that is possible, and it will do kind of the right thing there. Now what you'd really like is to be able to convert between triplets and 12/8, right? If you had something written in 6/8 or 12/8 with eighth notes, and then you said, you know what, I just want to rewrite this in 4/4 using triplets, or vice versa. I don't have that working yet. I think that's probably not terribly complicated, but it's definitely you know, more work to create and uncreate triplets and things. And then we have to also worry about what to do with triplets that aren't part of the multiple. Like what if you had a quintuplet and then you tried to change from, you know, some ratio in which eighth notes now become triplet eighths. I sort of think quintuplets would turn into something incredibly ugly that wouldn't even be musically feasible. 15 tuplets maybe, I don't know. So anyhow, that's not a thing yet, and maybe I'll figure out a way to make that work simply too. But anyhow, there you go. There's that feature. So you've got paste half, you've got paste double, and then you've got this paste special that lets you play interesting games there, also using the toolbar to select what your ratio is. So as I said, that feature is already in the nightly builds as of like an hour ago. So if you go to, if you have never downloaded a nightly build, by the way, let me get you to the page where you get them from. Here's a page where you can download nightly builds from. Let me go to the chat window. Do you see the chat window over here? Boy, there we go. So the trick is, when downloading a nightly build, you select your operating system, and then don't pick this first one. The first one, it says MuseScore Special. I'm not sure why we still have this at the top of the list, but this was there for compatibility. At some point, we changed the file format during the development of MuseScore 3, and if you have scores that were developed during an earlier pre-alpha version of MuseScore, you would need this version to be able to open those, I think. So don't pick that first boldface one. Pick the next one after it. This is going to be the version that has the most recent changes in it. So that version there will have those changes. And you'll see the same if you had picked Mac or if you had picked Linux as your operating system. Those are the nightly builds. I also want to mention, because I have to do my due diligence on this, that I do have my online course. And my online course for learning MuseScore, there is now a new French version of the course that is, I don't speak French, so I cannot really explain, tell you much about it, but it's Amandine. I can't speak well enough to pronounce her name, so I'm really sorry if I'm butchering this. Amandine Fressier, I don't know. She translated my course into French, and so you can also sign up for the course in French here. So this is where you can sign up for the course, and I am now partway through the process of updating the course for MuseScore 3. I've put in mostly text updates where I can just say, oh, this menu is moved here, this menu is moved there. I've added a couple of videos to talk about things like automatic placement. I'm going to, once 3.1 comes out, there's going to be a few other more noticeable changes, so I want to hold off until 3.1 is actually like fairly finalized before I really reshoot many of the videos. Because like one of the things you're going to notice is certain things like the way the inspector looks is quite different. Here's 3.1, whereas if I select some text, I guess I gotta find some text. Here's some text. It looks rather different. You know, here we have all the alignments are buttons and there's labels there, and in 3.1 it's they're just icons kind of, and there's a few other differences that make it such that I really want to hold off on redoing videos until 3.1 is out. But if you sign up for the course, you you just get the updates. It's not like buying the book where the book is already outdated, and no matter what version you buy of the book, it's outdated once I make an update. I'll keep updating the course. So anyhow, that's my commercial spiel for that. I probably next week will be talking more about 3.1 because we'll have the beta out, and I'll want to get people, show people previews of what's coming. The big thing that's coming, I can tell you right now, single note dynamics. It will finally be possible to have a note that crescendos, a single note that crescendos and decrescendos within the course of that note. So we'll get to see that in action next week, and some other new stuff, but that's really the big one. If people have other questions, I'm happy to look at them, but I think I have now said what I wanted to say. There's tons more to say about rhythm, of course, but I really wanted to talk about this aspect of it, the fact that there really is this commonality between how quarter note rhythms are written versus how eighth note rhythms are written versus the way 16th note rhythms are written. And if you can really learn to recognize that they're really just the same 8 things over and over again, you really simplify your life both reading and writing those rhythms. And now with this tool that is now available in MuseScore, it will make that process simpler. Oh yeah, there's one other thing that I do want to talk about with that tool is one of the actual uses for it. If you like writing fugues, or not just fugues, but really other styles of imitative counterpoint, there's a really common device that might happen where you might have the subject of your fugue that goes something like, let's see. Oh, I'm not even turning the sound on. Let me get the sound up on this thing. Okay. I meant to sing. I sang G, but I typed B, but that's what I meant. All right. So maybe this is the theme of your fugue, the subject of your fugue. And then later on, you then want to have this come in imitative counterpoint starting here. So you come in here and you paste it there. You take it down an octave and say, well, I don't want to come in at the same pitch level, C to C. I actually want to come in transposed. This is a common thing in fugues where you would come in at the fifth, a fifth above or a fifth below. So I have this. And then later on in the fugue, maybe you might have a passage where you really want this to come in, but you want it to come in at halftime. So now you can just do that. And this, if I were really writing a fugue, I would need to do some things. Oh, this doesn't have to start right on the beat. Like I can already see this entrance right there on, it creates a dissonant interval there. That maybe that's not the way it would happen, but maybe I would have a quarter rest and then come in. Oops, not that, but Control Alt. There we go. Is that what I meant? That's a double E. Okay, I must have selected the other version. So I select this, copy, and then this, paste. All right, so if I'm writing a fugue, I've got my original theme, I've got my restatement of the theme at a different pitch level. I would need to do something here to create appropriate counterpoint against this and cause it to, obey proper rules and so forth as far as resolution of dissonance and so forth. So actually, maybe I'll just do a quick version of this because it's fun for me. I haven't done this in a little bit. So C, and then maybe I'll go to, that's an A, so I'll go with a D. I'm looking, and then B, I'm just going to hold on to that D an extra beat. Shift W will add that dot, and then go with a C. that I'm going to tie over the bar line like that, so that it creates what's called a suspension, and then it becomes the first note of my diminution, which is the term for this. Anyhow, here's the beginning of my fugue. There you go. So anyhow, there's some things about this that are not actually cool part writing wise. This open fourth there is actually maybe not really the right thing to do. So, but whatever. Yeah, this isn't a fugue writing lesson. This is talking about how I might actually use that copy and paste. So it allowed me to create that diminution. And augmentation is a thing too. There might be somewhere else in the fugue where I want to have that same melody come in, but have it come in at double the note values. So it's that feature is going to come in useful in writing fugues. It's going to come in handy just if you write a piece starting it with eighth notes and then realize later, you know what, this is going to work better if I just rewrite the whole thing in sixteenths or vice versa. So now I've said everything that I want to say about rhythm and about this new feature. So next week, again, I'll probably be talking about other things about MuseScore 3.1, including the single note dynamics and showing off how that works. Mostly it just works, but it's kind of fun to play with. And take a look at whatever else is interesting to talk about in 3.1. So that said, I will sign off, and I will see you all next week. Thanks a lot.